What got you into teaching? You studied journalism. Guys, is the audio right? Just let me know if the echo is still there. So, Murray, yeah, what got you into teaching?
That's a good question, Eric. What happened is that I got a journalism degree and I graduated in 2001. So I worked for Rogers, had my own college radio show. I got kind of burned out. And it was my last class in my 4 years at university for my political science paper. And as I was leaving, I saw an advertisement on the wall, like, come to South Korea, save 25 grand over 3 years, come teach English with your fellow grad. And that was in May of 2001. So through this person, I spoke to him, and I originally had a job in Seoul, South Korea. But then lo and behold, I found out I had a long lost distant cousin in Daegu, South Korea, who used to work for Moon Kong English.
Okay.
So through him, I ended up going to work for Moon Kong.
Okay.
So I worked there for about a year. And I kind of went around to different hagwons like G&B, Wings English. And my first college job was in 2005 for Youngjin.
Okay.
And then eventually I worked at Yongnam University for 3 years. During that time, I got my master's degree while teaching a full course load. And because of that master's degree, I was able to flip my university job and go to the Middle East.
Wow.
So I've been here ever since 2014. But I also taught at Business English for 1 year in China in 2010.
We were just talking about this, guys. So you told me Disney English is a big franchise in China. Many.
It was a big, but now they closed their doors as of 2 weeks ago. They opened, I think, I'm going to say 2009. So I arrived in 2010. Like their original plan was, from my understanding, is that they were opening up a Disney World in Shanghai, but that was going to be opened in 2012 or 2013. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to have some synergy in the Chinese marketplace by opening up English academies. And the English academies, the focus was on ages 3 to 6. Most of the classes were kindergarten, but there might have been a couple of elementary classes. So they wanted to use that and the synergy to promote Disney products.
Okay, so it's
and I worked there for. Yeah.
So they're doing both. We've got a great question. Hazrul, we're going to get to your questions now, but first I want to get to Martin has a good question here. What are the differences between China and Korea? And I think in the future we can also start looking at what are the differences between teaching in the Middle East towards, teaching in Korea. But first question here,
yes.
What are the similarities between China and differences between China and Korea?
For China, I was only there for 8 months. My students were ages 3 to 8.
Yeah.
Most of the time in Korea, well, for an example, in Korea, their academies are after school. So you'll be teaching maybe from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and it's mostly elementary to middle school. With China, I noticed that my class would start at 2 and end at 8, and it was more of a focus on young learners. You do teach on the weekends.
Okay.
So your weekend off would be Monday, Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday.
I've heard that before.
As far as the visa process, I found South Korea was so much easier.
Yeah.
China, for me at the time, and I was really going to go to China again, but their visa process is such a huge hassle.
Okay.
One, you got to get your degrees. They want a BA and a CELTA. Or if you don't have the CELTA, you need 2 years experience teaching.
Okay.
So I have the CELTA and the M and the BA, so I have my pick of any school like Medellin, Wall Street.
Well, that's
excellent.
excellent.
I didn't like the visa process.
Okay, but Martin is also an expert on CELTA. I always ask him questions about that. So so basically you taught younger students and you only did it for 8 months. So it's perhaps not the greatest way to see all the similarities and differences, but we can talk about that a little bit in the future. But
one thing too, Eric, is the class. I found sorry to interrupt. The class length with Disney English was an hour and a half, right? For like if your class were an hour and a half, so you would teach for 50 minutes, give them a 5-minute break, and then teach again. So I taught young learners in South Korea before in kindergarten. That's too long. Like,
that's way too long.
The sweet spot for young learners, I find, is 30 to 35 minutes. But that was 90 minutes long. I also found the difference between the two of them is I found management is always more approachable in South Korea.
Okay.
Disney English was brand new. They were opening up, so they put people who were not qualified as academic managers or branch managers, and they had these these constant rules. Like you had to be outside in the main room with all the students playing and hanging out with them before class.
Wow.
I didn't really like that. I'd rather be in my classroom
preparing. Yeah. Well, it sounds very tough. About the time first, I want to say, Christina, hello, Christina, and Migam. Hi, Migam. Yeah, we're just talking with Murray here. He's got experience. So actually, yeah, and then Martin says here, Chinese management is more top-down and nepotism is quite prevalent. Okay. Yeah, yes. I could see that perhaps happening. What do you think? True?
Yeah, I agree. I agree totally 100%. With English, I didn't like the job, so I gave my notice, but they had a clause. So if I wanted to teach somewhere else, I'd have to wait 90 days. So I didn't really let that know. So I just found it was just, they didn't really know what they were doing. They're an entertainment company masquerading as an English academy.
Okay. Well,
and everything was focused on Disney products.
Yeah. So yeah, they're actually selling two things, the lessons and stuff. And guys, sorry if the stream is a little unstable. I think I need to install a fast internet in Korea. Yeah, Renee. So actually, let's get to some teaching related questions because just to pop some in there. So you've been teaching a while. One of the questions, one of the things you get asked for is like, what's your teaching methodology, or what is that paper that we have to make? You have to say basically how do you teach.
Well, there's like several of them, right? Like Dave Crashan and so on. Like I try to use the natural approach, try and use real world English whenever possible, try and make it as real as possible, because in Saudi Arabia or China or South Korea, students only have an opportunity to use English in that classroom. It's very rare that they get to practice it outside of your class.
Do you have any go-to lesson structures, or do you have any go-to things that you do, or games or activities? I think a lot of teachers usually have one or two things that they focus on.
Yeah, with games, it depends. With younger learners, like elementary, middle school, I have a cache of a USB with PowerPoint board games like SpongeBob, Simpsons, that I can flip in images and bring them up and I have to say what the word is. I like, there's a website called, I think it's called Boggles World, Boggles ESL World.
Right.
I'll send it to you. You can put the link in your, it's basically what it is. They have these board games like with dice that you can print and you can put your own vocabulary.
Okay, that sounds like
inside. And I find that's a really good survey list that you can put survey questions in boxes and give them to students. You have to get up and walk around and interview other students and write their answers down. So those are kind of like my two go-to, like in case of emergency, break open and use them.
Excellent. Well, we've got Martin says here, edutainment is more attractive in China, but he loves teaching Chinese students as they are so hardworking. I totally agree. I've only had, I think, a couple of Chinese students, and they were very hardworking, the ones I had. What do you think? Good? Agree?
Yeah, like generally, I find like with Saudi Arabia or China or South Korea, students are generally really nice, but there's differences between them, right? Like I find in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East in general, I find the students are very outgoing. Like they're very talkative. It's easy, right? But the problem I find with them is their grammar and their vocabulary and pronunciation are really weak. So I have to hone in on that. I find with South Korea, I can only really go with my university experience, is that they're really sharp with grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation, but they just need more speaking practice because they're generally more shy, I guess, or reserved.
Yeah, I think it's also a fear of making mistakes, looking silly in front of your friends and stuff. But I guess students have that all over the world, but I think there is an added stress to that in Korea because of the culture. Let me ask you. So, Martin says here, Renee asked, what age do you teach now in Saudi Arabia? So, what is your experience so you moved to Saudi Arabia. First, why? And then, what is your experience there?
Okay, so I worked at Young University for 3 years. I just completed my master's online, but I had to use use all my savings and funds to get it. So I was kind of broke, and I was on a website called SeriousTeachers.com.
Okay.
And you can click the countries that you're interested in, and they'll ping your email with jobs. And this job came up, and okay, the one difference I need to explain to everybody is that in Saudi Arabia, there's two types of visas. It's one called business visa. If you're ever interested in going to Saudi Arabia, 90% of the time you'll go on that visa. A, it's faster to get here, but B, it takes a longer time to get your own phone, rent a car, or that kind of thing. So my first job in Saudi Arabia was teaching for Aramco students. Aramco is this huge oil company. So they had these students aged 20 to 26. So it's basically the four main skills: reading, writing, grammar. And I had to use Q skills, and Headway. For some reason, Headway is very popular in the Middle East.
Oh, what is Headway?
So any place you go to, that will probably be your textbook.
Oh, that's the textbook you use. Who's the publisher?
I actually have a copy.
Excellent.
Copy of it right here. So chances are 90% of the classes you have in Saudi Arabia, if it's at a university, you'll be teaching this book or Q skills.
Okay. And
so
what do you think about the
book? And then I worked at a college for a year, and then I ended up working for a military contract.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. So I worked there for a bit, and then I worked at a college because Saudi Arabia opened up these colleges of excellence all over the country.
Yeah.
So it was a startup. So I worked there for a year. Then I moved to a military contract. There's lots of military contracts here in Riyadh, Jeddah, Dammam. So I taught for 3 years at the Air Force Base. And after 6 months teaching, I was promoted to head teacher. So I had to do a lot of admin work.
Wow.
So when you teach at a military contract, chances are you'll need a certification called DLI. It's called Defense Language Institute. So for me, I got mine through the Air Force Base in San Antonio. I think it's called Lackland Air Force Base.
Okay.
So they sent
I'm just going to stop there.
Saudi Arabia, I couldn't leave. I was a head teacher.
Okay, so I quickly want to go on. I just want to interrupt you quickly and say it was Renee's birthday. Renee, congratulations with your birthday, the 3rd. And Migam says natural approach is good for younger kids or beginner students. Now, sorry, so in Saudi Arabia, you're teaching. What is that experience like? I just want to get a little bit more to the teaching aspect, and we'll go to some of these questions that we'll also ask. So, yeah.
I find it really fulfilling. I'm really lucky. Like I just my 1 year anniversary at Prince Sultan University will be in the next 6 weeks. It's great. I find like my student size is about 20 to 25 students. Most of them are, I'm going to say, A1 or A2 in the level of English.
Wow.
So my focus is for them is pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar. They don't really have a sense of grammar. But it's a very outgoing class. They'll bring tea. They'll bring dates to class. They're great. I have no complaints at all.
Nice.
The class size is usually 20 to 25 students. You'll have a smartboard. All classrooms in Saudi Arabia, if it's a military contract or university, have smartboards. You can bring the book up. You can bring up YouTube and so on.
Okay, lots of freedom then to add some things to it too. Well, that sounds. So, what about the culture in Saudi Arabia? Because so in Korea, obviously, you know, it's they only speak Korean. So for the majority of students, you know, they watch TV shows and they watch movies. It's becoming increasingly popular, but I mean, they still just only use Korean. But I found in South Africa and African countries in general, they actually embrace English a little bit better, and even in places like India where they start using English more in their language. What do you feel about Saudi Arabia, the level, if you can compare it to Korea, of the students?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll do my best to answer it, Eric. When I went to South Korea, my very first time was in July of 2001. I didn't know anything about South Korea. I only knew 2 things about South Korea. One, out of it. 2, they were having the World Cup in 2002. So those are the only 2 things I knew. But I didn't feel any culture shock. I was 23 years old, a new language, learning how to navigate from my house to school. So when I came to Saudi Arabia, it was a lot easier.
Sorry, Murray, I just switched off your video. I
already experienced what.
I just wanted to check the connection, so I switched off your video. You can switch it back on again. It's just I wanted to see I think the connection isn't great, but okay. Please continue. Sorry for interrupting you.
No problem. So South Korea was a wonderful experience. So I learned how to deal with culture shock or learning a new language. So when I came to Saudi Arabia, there wasn't really any culture shock. And the biggest thing I was surprised about was most businesses, Starbucks, restaurants, laundromats, have Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, and English is used everywhere. Malls, gas stations, shops. So it was not so difficult, I guess.
Okay.
So I didn't really feel, the only big difference I feel is that the temperature is about 15 degrees hotter than it would be in Korea.
Yeah, it must be.
Like right now it's 52 degrees right now.
Wow, that's crazy. I'm just going through some of these now. Renee says it looks like the pay is much greater in the Middle East, but I imagine the cost of living is greater. Martin says pay is tax-free.
Cost of living is actually not that. Sorry, the cost of living is not. I find it's lower than South Korea. For example, my university pays for my apartment. Now they say it's tax-free, but Saudi Arabia's supermarket, it's an add-on 15% tax, so it's not quite tax-free. The salaries have lowered a bit in Saudi Arabia the last few years. My advice, if you want to make the most money in Saudi Arabia, would to be working in a military contract. That could be Blue Force, Vanel, Kratos, Salient. It's a lot of money, but it's a grind. It's probably the most difficult job I've ever had.
Can you give us an idea of how much it is compared to Korea, or maybe in US dollar, what we can expect?
Okay, so my last year in South Korea at Yongnam University, my salary was, I think, as a level 2 instructor, I think it was 2.5 million won, but after tax and pension, it was about 2.25. So I think that's maybe $2,000, I think.
About 2,000. Yeah, about.
2.2 million.
Yeah, about 222. Yeah,
okay, so my military contract was about $6,000 US, $6,000, and they provided me a car, housing on a compound, but it's a grind.
It's a tough job.
My current job is 13,000 SAR, so I'm going to say it's about $4,000 US a month. But I'm only teaching 20 hours a week, 4 hours a day.
Not bad at all.
Any hour after that's $60 an hour. So my 6 classes a day here equals my military salary.
Wow. Okay, well, you're lagging a little bit. I can see Renee says they lag, and Martin says per Murray, he's lagging a little bit. But she's got a great question. Yeah, so it sounds. I know a lot of teachers that went to Saudi Arabia, and it's definitely it's if you go, they pay a lot more, almost twice as much as they do here in South Korea, which where they actually the pay in Korea for foreign teachers has been stagnant for the last 20 years. So yeah, that's not a surprise.
It's been stagnant since 2002.
Yeah. Exactly. But Renee
asks... That's a good question. So her name is Teacher Renee. There are female teachers. Yes, there are female teachers. The female teachers will be at colleges, universities, and maybe public schools.
And they can teach boys and girls, yeah?
At military contract.
You can teach either sex, right?
Yes. Prince Sultan University has female teachers there, yes.
Renee also asked
here, so Prince, like my university.
Yeah.
Oh, about safety as a female.
Yeah.
I feel safe. There's as long as you dress modestly, like the hijab and so on.
Mm.
I find it's pretty safe. And also, too, the last couple of years, Saudi Arabia has kind of loosened up the rules. Like women can drive a car now, and women can work at jobs. Like when I went to the supermarket last week, women work as cashiers now. So it's opening up much slowly.
Okay, I see. Okay, yeah, Renee. So
before,
great questions.
For a long time, it was a very male-dominated society.
Yeah. I think it still is, but hopefully it starts opening up a little bit more, and they bring in women to do more jobs, and to be more equal. Renee, thank you so much for these questions. So Renee first asked, how many female teachers are there? And you said there are some teachers coming into the universities and
yes.
Worried about safety. You basically said, if you just dress modestly, then it should work. Now I want to go to some teaching questions, because at the very start of the live stream, Hazrul asked a couple of questions. The first one is, how do you teach English in an EFL country? And then another question is that we can elaborate on is, do we need to speak English fully, or should we combine both languages? Okay, so I think that's one of the things we've talked about before, actually, is, how much of the student's home language should you use in English? And I think the answer is the least amount possible, to use as much of English.
My CELTA trainers told me, don't use your student's native tongue in class, because it's too much. It'd be too much of a crutch. Like there's other ways around it. Google Images, synonyms. There's always a runaway. There's always a roundabout way, because you don't want to use their native tongue in the classroom whenever possible.
Yeah, I think this is Hazrul. That's a good question. Yeah, so there are ways around it. For myself, oops, sorry, I always put the mouse pointer in my face and it looks strange. My experience though is sometimes I use it just to joke with the students. If they say something, I could ask them, okay, what is the Korean for this? Or, just to be funny, I would say something. It keeps the students engaged. And I think I'd rather have the students engaged than, try and just be myself and be natural. The students relate to it too, so they can see, yeah, it's not just an English teacher, it's a person too. What I would also say is that with also instruction, sometimes I've been to Korean classes where I learned Korean, and then the teacher would try and explain everything in Korean, where if she just gave me the equivalent in English for grammar point or something, I would immediately pick it up. And sometimes, so that would help me learn something faster. Sometimes with young students, you can use some instructions, but you want to wean them off of that and start using English more as instructions so that they can follow. Guys, if you have any questions, put it down below. So far, man, Murray, I've had such a good time talking so far. The other question that Hazrul asked is, how do you teach English in an EFL country? Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Like, how do I teach English in Saudi Arabia, China, South Korea, like anywhere where, like, as an English teacher?
I guess let's say you went to in a foreign language country. Yeah. So we talked about what your teaching methodology is, but I think his question is just like, if you started teaching again, or if let me rephrase this: if you had to teach some teachers that are new to let's say an academy or something, what advice would you give them?
Like train new teachers?
Yeah. Or let me rephrase it again. 2001, you came to Korea, right?
Yep.
If you could spend 1 hour with yourself and train yourself to be the teacher, like current you versus 2001 you, what would you tell yourself?
Lots of things. I was the worst teacher imaginable. I was horrible. One, keep your instructions simple. Don't use extra language. Like, I find a lot of new inexperienced teachers use a lot of language. Like, they say, open your book. You don't need to say, please, everybody, open your book. Keep the instructions very simple. When you're teaching in, like, a speaking activity, get a couple of students up and have them as an example up in front of the classroom. Right? So if I'm teaching an activity, get someone up and have them as my partner, and then switch get him to stand up, and get another student to come up to the front and get them to do it again, and then get the second person to sit down, get the third person up, so that the students can see their brethren doing it in the classroom.
Nice.
So simple instructions, comprehension questions. Because I used to ask, "Oh, do you understand?" And that's like everyone's going to say yes, right? So they call them CCQs in CELTA, like comprehension. They're like yes or no questions.
Right.
So you kind of gauge the understanding that people are picking up what you're teaching them.
Very, very.
So that's
great.
a big thing.
Yeah.
That one. Simple instructions.
Yeah.
And monitoring.
Well, explain under monitoring. What would you do there?
I used to be in 2001. I would just stand up in front of the board, right? I would never walk around.
Place yourself against
right?
the board.
And also,
yeah.
You're right. So and there's dead spots in the classroom. There's the far corners are dead spots, right? So get up and walk around and just observe while they're doing group work or pair work or anything. Walk around and observe and take notes and just go over what you saw while they're doing an activity.
Wow, man! I'm saying, and man, Murray, these are some great tips. You know, I feel like every week I'm going to ask. You know, if you could go back and teach yourself, I love these tips. I just want to go back to the first tip where you get students to actually role play the activities. I really like that idea. It is difficult, however, with students that are very shy in Korea, but I feel, you know, that should never be an excuse. You know, as teachers, we're not only teaching language, we're also, you know, preparing them for the real world, and we want them to be more confident. So, and the more they do it, the first time they're going to be shy, they're going to say, no, I don't want to. The 10th time they do it, it's part of their class, and that's just the way they are. And imagine them going out now, and they're not so shy. I just want to go over here. Renee says, thank you so much, Murray. Saima, in my school, we are not allowed to use combined languages. I feel it should, I understand the reason why, because if you, in Korean public schools, in many schools, I guess, but in Korean public schools, a lot of Korean teachers use 98% Korean in the English class. Migam, you will probably be able to tell me better, but you know, I've taught, and a lot of the teachers, not all of them, but some of the English teachers, the old way of teaching, they taught a lot of grammar, and the teacher's just there reading everything in Korean and just explaining. My mom says hello. My mom says hi, Murray. Saima says thank you. Hazrul, we're still continuing with this. I like this topic. And Migam says, how do you... Okay, so we're going to get to how do you assess students' progress and how do you give them feedback. We're going to answer that one now. Migam says it is true, which disappointed you. Yeah, I get it, but Migam, that's why you're a teacher now, and that's why you're improving. I've seen your classes, Migam. I really enjoyed it. Now I want to go back, Murray. So you said first we have to get students to role play. In every class, I get my students to practice. You know, even you don't have enough time to get each student to do it, but you're going to get the students to maybe one or two groups to do an example. So what I like to do is when the students do an activity in a group or with a partner, I'll tell them, okay, do one of the questions for me, or you two, you ask. But make sure you get to all the students so that all the students are participating in class and doing that. And then your second point, you said, what was your second point again?
Monitoring simple lessons,
right.
Observing students when they're doing the work.
I love walking around the class. I think most teachers, you know, unless you're busy marking or something, you should walk around and interact with the groups, because if you're just standing in front waiting for something to happen, I mean, you know, you're going to create relationships by walking around. The students are going to feel like they've got to work in class, otherwise, you know, they can just do what they want. So very important. And then the last one, monitoring, where you make sure the students understand you. For example, so monitoring.
Yeah. So what was the question?
Yeah, so monitoring, I don't want to talk the whole time, so I was going back to monitoring. So you said with
Okay.
monitoring, it's important to ask the students questions to check their understanding. And so
Yes.
Migam says here, and I think it adds to her question, how do you assess students' progress? So monitoring and assessing students'
Okay. Well,
progress.
Megan, thank you for the question.
Hmm.
So when I do group work or pair work, I usually set my classroom either as U-shape because it's
Okay.
easy to walk around, or I put them like a cafe, 4, 4, 4, 4, and 4. So when I get them to do like, for an example, like maybe vocabulary exercise, I'll walk around and take notes, like just observe what each group is doing. And when you walk around, you can kind of figure out, okay, this group here doesn't know this, and this group here does this. So when I'll give them a time limit, like maybe 5 minutes, and have a timer up on the smartboard, so they keep track of time. I'll go and ask a few students questions, and maybe one could be like, what's something you eat during a hot day? And maybe Eric says ice cream. I go, okay. Then Nigam, do you agree? Do you agree? And if everyone seems to be in agreement, they understand, right? But when there's issues, you can just teach another way. Like it could be a synonym or whatever. And it also depends on assessing, right? Because it's different for grammar than for reading, and it's different for speaking. So it kind of depends on what you're assessing.
Well, that's a fantastic point. Guys, I want to talk about this too. Is while you're walking around, you're checking the students' understanding, you're asking them questions, and many times, perhaps I explained something, but I didn't explain it clearly enough, so they're doing something a little bit different than what I want to. So by walking around, you actually get the opportunity to see, oh, wait, guys, and then you just explain it to them. And yeah, so you check their understanding. That's a great point. My dad says hi. We'll watch the rest after class. Hi, Dad. Migam says pre-service teachers are supposed to teach English only in English and in the interview, but in-service teachers used 99% Korean. Paradoxical, right? And then
what's pre-service and in-service? What's pre-service and in-service?
I guess what she means is like before when you go for an interview and you're getting ready to teach, it's just in English, you're ready to teach. And then as soon as you go into the classroom, you kind of snap back to the way you were taught English, and you just fall into that mode of explaining in that. And Saima says, Migam, in my country, we have the same problem. Okay, now, Murray, you brought up something very interesting about, assessment. We've got to remember that there are different ways of assessing the students. Can you talk about some of the ways that you assess students, be it writing or grammar or whatever it might be?
Yeah, like over at Prince Sultan University, we assess our classes every 3 weeks. So, for an example, maybe that every 3 weeks, maybe the first quiz will be a reading, writing. Maybe the next quiz will be listening. So, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
Yeah, so you actually at the university, you're doing a lot of assessments every 3 weeks. It might be a listening assessment or writing. So you're actually assessing the students very often, which I think is good. It's just if it's formative, assessment, or if it's, what's the other one again? Formative and...
Well, so for an example, with assessments, what I like to do is at the beginning of every book, they'll have it's broken down of what they should be able to do depending. I don't know if you guys can see the book I'm showing.
I can see.
For an example, sorry. So can everybody
it's
see
okay.
this?
You can just explain.
Yeah. So for an example, like speaking, right? So just the job, it's about job, right? So students should be able to talk about what's in the news or role-playing interviews. So I look at this before I teach and use that as a gauge on how to assess what they have to do. So for an example, just the jobs, maybe I'm teach vocabulary that says phrasal verbs, literal or idiomatic. And if I notice that they're not learning it, I'll just teach them a different way. So I use the beginning of the book as an idea of what I need to teach. What are the 3 things I have to do in the classroom?
Excellent. Right. So I like that. I mean, for each class, there should be something that you want the students to learn, right? There are a few things, skills they want to learn, knowledge, so you're going to check their understanding. And I really enjoy doing that because it gives me more feedback too. You know, it's not just students' feedback, but the teacher learns to teach them better too. I think when it comes to student feedback, Migam just said, yeah, you get summative assessment and formative assessment. I kind of forgot that for a second. But yeah, so we got to use these different ways. Yes, you should have the formal test to check their knowledge if they reached a certain point. But during class too, just check in on those students, because if you explain something very quickly, it can have a massive impact on them later in terms of understanding it. Remember, we have to get the basics right. You know, it's like that for any students. And then
also too, Eric, it's also too as a teacher for experience, you get very intuitive on what students are picking up and what they aren't picking up. Like, trust your judgment, right? And remember, with whatever you have planned for your lesson, you can deviate from it if it's not working. You can change things out, and it's just with experience, right? Like I remember one semester, my first year at Young University, I had to be randomly observed, so I gave my lesson plan to my head teacher, and I taught the same class before, and I didn't really like it, so I scrapped it. But I knew my bullet points, so I didn't abble it. I knew what I was doing. I just scrapped something and did something else, and I performed really well.
It's important.
So trust your judgment. Trust your judgment. Be prepared. But always, if you have my classes, I have a 90-minute class, so I have like 2 hours of material. So if they work really well, really quickly, I can do something else.
Excellent.
If they're not getting it, you can work slower. So always, it's just with experience being intuitive.
Those are fantastic tips. I'm not sure if I've got that one in my 100 tips videos that I'm bringing out, but I'll add it as 101. Yeah, so true. Trust your judgment. And be ready to shift or to explain something in a different way. Sometimes during class, I realize that maybe I made a mistake in the way that I taught something. And then I say, listen, guys, stop what you're doing. I'm sorry. I apologize. But let's do it this way. Or let me explain it again in a different way. Right. So very important. And I like also the fact that you've got a surplus of activities and ideas. And that is what every teacher should have. Because if you walk into the classroom, the great and you don't know what to do with excess time, then it's not going to be very well. And then what is the other one?
Question Renee just asked me, how motivated are your students? That's a really, because Eric and I were talking about that before we came on live. So, all right, Renee, so when I answer this, it's this in generalities. Okay, so in South Korea, like I told Eric, I loved my students at Young University. Taught them for years. They were always well prepared. They had like an electronic English-Korean dictionary. They had pens and papers. It was great. Now, with my job here, it's a little bit different. The students aren't really motivated to learn. What it is that my university has 2 departments. So one is like you teach freshmen, sophomore, like Eric's job at Daegu University. My job in my department is called Community Services. So we get clients like military, government officials. So for an example, my last class, SMG 8, before the pandemic happened, they sign up through their military commander to come for 1 year to my class to learn English. If they pass at the end of the 1 year, they get heaps of benefits, like a higher rank, a promotion, a higher stipend. But they're not really that motivated to learn outside of the classroom. So they kind of treat the class as like not a playground. It's like it's more relaxed from, like they're not out marching out in the sun, right? And they're nice, but I find generally they're kind of immature when it comes to
studying,
to taking the bull by the horns and learning outside the class.
Right. Well, that's
and with my military contract, when I worked in the military for 3 years, the Air Force would send cadets into the DLI program. So if they were to pass their ECL exam, or it's kind of like an ALCPT exam, they would go to Lackland Air Force Base and learn how to be a pilot mechanic.
Wow.
So you have really highly motivated students, but then you have students that the military pushed into the classroom that they don't really want to be there. So the motivation varies quite a bit.
How do you address that though? Because I feel, okay, in any classroom, you're going to have different motivations. Some students are highly motivated, they work very hard, and they're a pleasure to have. You get students that are just in the class and they do what they're told, and then you get students that actively avoid doing work. Now, what do you think? How do you get your students to be motivated, or how do you get all your students on board with what you're teaching them?
Well, like my role in class, I don't care if it's Prince Sultan University or if it's my military contract or Korea, everyone contributes. We're all like a baseball team, right? Pitcher, catcher, center fielder, right? We all contribute. So, and you can kind of tell after a class or two, like who are the students that are not motivated.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I will get the less motivated students and get them closest to me in the classroom, sit closest to me. And I will maybe focus more on them, like stand closer to them, and just so that they can't goof off, I guess.
Well, that's...
I try and make things fun too, but I'll crack the whip sometimes because everyone has to contribute. It's a team thing.
I love what you're saying. I'm just going to quickly go in here. Renee says, thank you for your honesty. I agree. Thank you so much, Murray. You're sharing a lot of good advice and tips, and I feel like I'm learning a lot. And Migam says, formative assessment is trending these days during practicum. I saw every teacher collects worksheets and quiz papers at the end of the lesson. It's good to have evidence of, students' progress. Migam, I'm going to say it's good to have evidence, but really as a teacher, if you have too much paperwork to do, that can really bring you down. And sometimes it's not that necessary. I mean, you can do tests and stuff every now and again, but I feel like if it's a trend, like you say, it's trending, that's when things get dangerous, because just because something is a trend doesn't mean that it's good. So if I'm testing my students every week, then I'm wasting a lot of time on testing and not actually practicing or learning, if that makes sense. That's how I feel about it. Murray, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I trust your judgment, right? Like it's like for me, I used to have 3 bullet points, what I need to accomplish in class, right? So use those. There's other things you can use. You can use, there's a website called Quizlet. I don't know if it's popular in South Korea, but it's really popular in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
You can make multiple different activities for vocabulary or for grammar. Boggles World. When at the military contract, we had to write weekly cadet progress reports. So when they would go to another teacher, you can go back and see what they had difficulty with. So we had assessment quizzes that we would give students before their DLI quiz, and you can kind of gauge what the issues have. Like, for an example, I had a class of 10, and there's 50 questions on an assessment quiz I would give them every week, 25 listening and 25 grammar. So we would mark it together, and I'd go around like, okay, so Eric, question 8 was wrong. I'd go around and find out who else had it wrong, so maybe 3 out of 8. Then I'll go, okay, well, that's on page 54 in the book. I'll go back and reteach it again.
I like that, because that is one of the reasons why during this time when we had to go online, a lot of teachers said, okay, well, the students are sending in their assignments individually, or when they do their work. I think one of the greatest values that there is when you teach a group and one student makes a mistake, you can teach something and maybe 2 or 3. Yeah, and they've got it too. And instead of because the students are also learning from that feedback. I just quickly want to go back to what you said about how you get your students to be part of the family, how to get them motivated. And I want to share an experience that I had recently. So with my online classes, I saw all my students, and I think my classes went really well. I was very happy with it. But I had a class on Wednesday that was they weren't very motivated. It was probably my worst class, and some of the students didn't pitch up. Some of them, they didn't really work that hard. They were very lazy, and I pushed them. And I got them to come every week. And I checked so the students assess you, right? Your students assessment of your classes. And my other classes did really well. I think it's usually very high, and again, really high, what I expected. But then this one class just bombed me. They're like, oh, suddenly it's not horrible, but it's probably the lowest score I've been given. And in my mind, I'm like, how hard I worked for you, and I know that I pushed very hard. So I feel that they have improved. If they didn't take my class, they wouldn't have improved as much as they have. So I believe that I did my best for that class. So I am a bit not upset, but of course I'm not going to be unhappy with a bad assessment or a bad review, but I'm not going to get down on myself because I knew I was pushing them all the time. We were working and they have improved. So I think as a teacher, you should have that as your final goal, is that, you are changing these students, be it with, their English or just becoming better people.
I agree, Eric. And to everybody listening to us, you're going to have clunkers, right? You're not going to be perfect all the time, right? So as long as you're prepared and you do your best, that's fine. Always worry about the next lesson. Don't worry so much about the previous lesson if they went really poorly, right?
Yeah.
Because tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
It's like it's a clean slate, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna have bad days. You're gonna have bad classes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Not all classes are.
Even if it's a bad class, it's always like a learning tool. Like maybe I can be more energetic, or maybe I can teach something differently, right?
Yeah, let's add something. Let's improve.
I used to keep notes on. I used to write reflections on my classes of what went well and what didn't go well, right? So.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I definitely think so. Not all classes are going to be the same. You're going to have some classes where the students are just so involved and they enjoy it, and you can just feel them almost, they don't want to leave the class. So easy. And then other classes where it's just a drag and you just, it's so difficult, so something happens. And you think back.
It could be something like from outside of your control. Like with my SMG class, they were punished by the general. They were up all night. They had to march all night because they broke some kind of rule of the barracks, right? So they were tired. There's some things out of your control that you make the class not so good, right? So everything's always a teachable learning lesson, but you can't take yourself too badly.
Only compare.
As long as you're prepared.
Only compare yourself to the past version of you. So the better you become and the more you improve and you check these things that you do wrong, you're just going to improve, and that that the quality of your lessons are going to go up. Yeah, you're going to have some bad ones, but you're going to have better ones. It's just going to improve. Definitely.
I see a question here. It says, does Saudi have a national curriculum? That's a really good question, but I don't think it can really. It depends, right? Like a military contract, it's a national curriculum from Lackland and San Antonio. But with public school, I'm not too sure. I haven't taught at a public school. I've only taught at university or a military contract.
And Renee asks, what is the name of the curriculum you are using? The one that you held up, that book is called Headway?
All right. So I honestly, Eric, I don't like this textbook. It's probably my least favorite textbook I've ever used. Oh. There's a book I used at Youngnam that I absolutely love. It's called English Firsthand. I don't remember who the publisher is.
I've got it right.
I love that book.
You continue talking. I'll quickly get English Firsthand. Give me 1 second. My knees.
So Renee, I loved English Firsthand. But this book here, it's called New Headway Plus. So we make our own curriculum, our own assessment out of this book. Okay, the grammar is fine, but the problem with this book is that the grammar vocabulary jumps a bit too much between the workbook and student book. Like the workbook will have vocabulary, but the student book doesn't have. So it's a bit of a mismatch. But my go-to books in South Korea, if any of you guys teach in South Korea, Jazz English, there's two books. It's a pink book and a blue book. Okay, it has like 50 to 100 vocabulary words of Korean. And there's 20 conversational questions and cultural differences between South Korea and America.
Nice.
One book I really love to use for supplemental, it's called Slangman.
Slangman.
So it's about idioms.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's called by David Burke, I think. I have it in my office. If you Google Slangman, you should be able to find it in South Korea. There's like 4 of them. Street Speak 1, Street Speak 2, Street Speak 3, and something else. Like they teach 10 idioms per lesson. and they give you like a translate, like a explanation and activities with it.
Okay.
So when I was teaching my government classes before the pandemic, I would bring in Slangman once a week
and talk about some idioms,
because you hear idioms in movies, in TV, we use idioms all the time. So those are my 3 favorite books.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Renee, it's Jazz English, so it's Jazz.
Oh, sure, no, Chaz, like jazz.
Chaz?
Like Jazz, Jazz.
Jazz, yeah,
Jazz English.
Yeah.
It's a blue and a purple book. I think they updated it. Like,
very popular.
So I have one from 2005.
Yeah, I think a lot of people use that. And Teenager TV, hi. Well, guys, we're almost at the end of our live stream. Murray, I have to say thank you so much for coming on. You know, you've helped me a lot, and I'm sure the viewers out there will really enjoy this. What are some final thoughts? Guys, I want you to put in your final questions to Murray or your final comments that you want to put in, and we'll almost finish this live stream. Murray, what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so if you're a teacher, preparation is king. So, and if you have like a 50-minute class, always have something like maybe prepare for 60 minutes. Do a lot of pair work. Remember, the students are the audience, not you, so don't lecture. Keep your instructions very simple. When you're given instructions in class, get a student up in front with you and have that person interact with that person as a role play, and then bring someone else with those 2 students to do it. So it gives the students responsibility, gives them ownership of the work. So those are the things. And also, too, like, have fun. Like, I miss South Korea. Like, I was going to go back to South Korea on my vacation in September, but due to the pandemic, I'm going to probably wait till 2021.
Wow.
But ESL, it's a bit of a grind, but it's a very fulfilling job. It's like I have like millions of memories from South Korea, China, and Saudi Arabia. And I wouldn't change my career for the world.
Excellent. Wow. I see Teenager TV. Sorry I came late. No problem. I know you guys are busy too. And also, Somadin, I was wondering where you are. It's so nice to have you, but we're almost going to finish now. I want to quickly talk about Murray just said, I mean, ESL, it's once you get into it and as you improve, it's just going to get easier and more fun. And sometimes I talk about, it can be a hassle doing the same lessons and doing the same thing over and over again. But, the students are always changing and there's new things to talk about. So I like your idea of always interacting with the students. I mean, when my students come in, all of them are getting questions during that class. All of them are going to practice. They're going to do something because that's what is expected. And oh, you are using Zoom, right, Teenager? We're using Zoom. Yeah, Murray, it's been a pleasure having you. I think you did a fantastic job. Everyone, I want to say thank you so much. Murray, what are you doing this week? Are you almost on vacation? Sorry, last question.
Well, I've actually, since March, I haven't had any classes. So my classes are supposed to start August 9th, but it's kind of up in the air. Like, we were going to do some Zoom classes, but I got kind of pushed back. And it sounds from my director that we're going to maybe have classrooms opening August 9th. They bought a bunch of desks with some kind of plexiglass or something. So they're planning here in Saudi to, because we've already reopened on the 21st. Like everything's reopened now. So I think that's it.
Yeah, actually, with our university opened for 1 week to do the test, and it was so nice. I've only seen my students online on Zoom, and even then I told them they don't have to show their faces as long as they talk and they're active in class. I'm fine with it. And then for tests, I had them switch on their video. So it was so nice finally meeting my students. And we also had some, I think the reason that we met at university is for the students to get used to the new procedures. What we had to do is, when you go into the university, first they check your temperature, and then you get a sticker that your temperature was taken. And then you've got an app, and on the app you check, I haven't been sick, my temperature is below this. And then it gives you a QR code, and each building that you go into, you've got to scan the QR code. They were really hands-on. I was super impressed. So hopefully, that will help it that way. Okay, well, Murray, good luck for your classes in the future, and I'd love to talk to you again. You helped us so much.
Yeah, sure. Like, anytime you guys want me on, I'd be happy to come and chat with you guys again. It was great.
I loved it. Thank you, Murray. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.